In this chapter, we're going to explore the Flash drawing tools. The drawing tools are probably already familiar to you from other applications, but let's go ahead and take a look at how we could use them in Flash. Let's begin by creating a new document. I have the welcome screen open in Flash. I'm just going to simply click the ActionScript 3.0 here in the middle to create a new blank document. When we're working in Flash, you'll see that you have the white square there in the middle. That is called the stage. It's similar to a canvas in Photoshop or an artboard in Illustrator. Whatever we draw, if it's on that stage area, the white rectangle, that's what will be shown when your project is exported into a SWF file or a movie file. Anything in the gray area outside the rectangle will not be seen when your Flash project is published. So you can keep things outside that area that you don't want others to see when it's actually published. So we need to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's start drawing with some of the basic tools in Flash. So if we look at our tools panel here on the right hand side, I'm working in the Essentials workspace. We can see that here up on the workspace switcher. We've got our tools panel here on the right. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. I think you can see everything just fine. And I'm going to leave my properties panel open at the same time, because when I change my tools, my properties panel will change, reflecting things that are available for that tool. Let's go ahead and start with our shapes. We've got some basic shapes that we can work with, just like we have in many programs. If I hover over the rectangle, you'll see it says Rectangle Tool on it as my screen tip. And when I click and hold on the rectangle, I see we have a rectangle, an oval, a rectangle primitive, oval primitive, and a polystar tool. We're going to go ahead and play with the rectangle tool, the oval tool, and the polystar tool in this section, just to get ourselves familiar with drawing in Flash. So let's go ahead and keep our rectangle tool. When we have that selected, you'll notice that the properties panel does change. It shows that we are working with the rectangle tool. And you can see here we have a stroke color and a fill color. The stroke color at this moment is turned off. We've got the not sign, which means when I draw, I will only have a fill, no stroke. And then, of course, we have this fill color here on the right, designated by the paint bucket. And if we click on these, you'll get your swatches panel that pops up, the 256 saved colors for the web. In addition, you'll have some different gradients down here at the bottom that are available. So let's just go ahead and pick a blue color. I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke. And I want to pick something bright. So I'm just going to pick a bright green just so that we can see the difference between our stroke and our fill. Let me go ahead and make my stroke thicker by dragging the slider. And you can see it jumps quite a bit from when you're sliding it. So if you can't quite control it, we can click over here and you can type your number in. So I'm just going to make mine 2. And I'm going to go ahead and keep the style as solid. So that's the stroke style. And here, if I click on the drop-down menu, you'll see that we can make it a little bit thinner with a hairline, a solid, dash, dotted, etc. So you do have some different styles that you can apply. And down here, we can also add corner radiuses to our rectangle. So if we don't want a squared edge, 90-degree angle on our rectangle, we can adjust that and make a rounded rectangle. So let's go ahead and just click and drag again on our stage. Our stage area is the white area. I'm just going to click and drag, and we're going to create a rectangle. Now, if I hold my Shift key, you'll see the Shift key constrains the proportions of my rectangle so that it becomes a perfect square. But I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle, so I'm not going to hold the Shift key. And you'll notice that when I'm drawing, let me undo this, Command Z or Control Z. When I'm drawing, it's drawing from my cursor and I'm dragging to the right, so it's going from the top left to the bottom right when I'm drawing. So that's one way that we can draw a rectangle. Another way, if we hold our Alt key on a Windows or Option on a Mac and I click and drag, you'll notice that we're drawing from the inside out rather than from the corner out. So that could give you a little bit more flexibility when you're drawing if there's a specific shape that you want to create and you aren't able to get the size that you want and you're using a reference point when you're drawing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get my selection tool. That's the letter V on your keyboard, or I can click it here on my tools panel. It's the black arrow. I'm going to click on my rectangle. I clicked one time. You'll notice that when I clicked on this, I've been drawing in shape mode. We'll talk a little bit more later about the different drawing modes that are available in Flash, but we're going to use the default shape mode. So when we click on this, you'll see I see a lot of dots. That tells me that my rectangle is selected. I could come over here on my properties panel. I could change the fill color. I can also click and drag. If I click and drag to move my rectangle, you'll notice what happens is that I've separated the middle of my rectangle from the stroke because I clicked one time. Let me do Command Z or Control Z to undo that. Now I want to show you again. If I use my black arrow, again my selection tool, the letter V on my keyboard, I'm going to double click on my rectangle. Now you'll notice that the center or the middle of the rectangle is selected. We see the little dots, as well as the stroke or the border around the rectangle is also selected. So now when I click and I drag, I'm moving both at the same time. So in fact, if you want to draw a rectangle and you just want the stroke and outline of the rectangle, you could simply draw it and then remove the middle if you want to, or you could draw it with no fill. So again, if I click it one time, I'm only selecting the middle, Command Z, Control Z. If I double click, I'm selecting both, and then both come with it. So that's basic drawing. Now let's go ahead and click on our rectangle tool, and I'm going to select the oval tool, and we'll go ahead and keep the same colors. You'll notice that our fill and stroke, again, they've stayed with the same colors that we've selected previously on the rectangle. We can again adjust our styles and our strokes, and we can also adjust our angles when we're drawing. So I can adjust my angles when I'm drawing. Let me just go ahead and bring these out a little bit and show you what happens when I draw. You'll see I get kind of a strange shape. I got maybe like a pizza wedge or a pie wedge shape because of those angles that I've selected. I'm going to do Command Z, Control Z to turn that off. If I turn off the closed path, let me just change the start angle and leave the end angle at 0. When I click, you'll see I now have an outline of my circle and it's left a gap in it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave these at 0. I'm going to leave it closed, and I'm going to draw an oval. Now if I want a perfect circle, just like with the rectangle, if I hold my Shift key down, I'll get a perfect circle rather than an oval. Also, if I hold my Alt key down, I'm drawing from the center out. So let's go ahead and move our cursor into approximately the center area of our rectangle. And let's hold down our Alt key and our Shift key. So we're going to draw a perfect circle drawing from the center out. I'm going to click and drag, and I want to essentially make a little circle inside of my rectangle, much like that. And you'll notice, because the fill colors are the same, the center of my circle matches the fill color on my rectangle. Now let's get our selection tool, the letter V on our keyboard. I'm going to click on the center of my circle, and I'm going to press delete. So what have I done? I've created a rectangle with a hole in the middle. That's the shape of the circle, and the stroke was the same color as my rectangle. So all I did was I drew a circle inside my rectangle. I held down my Alt and my Shift key, or my Option, my Shift key, to draw a circle in the center of my rectangle, and then I deleted the middle of my rectangle. So now I have a shape that has no middle to it, and that's kind of cool because I could probably use this idea for a lot of different things. Okay, we've got my circle here. Let me go ahead and move that. And let's click on our shape tools again here on our tools panel, and let's go down to Poly Star tool. Now the Poly Star tool, let me go ahead and change our colors up. I'm going to go ahead and pick a shade of blue for my fill, and let me pick a, I picked a shade of green for my stroke, and I'm going to pick a darker shade of color here, maybe one of these browns. I've selected a dark blue for my fill, and then I just picked a brown color for my stroke. If I click on Options, you'll see I have a couple styles that I can draw. I can draw a polygon, or I can draw a star. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my star. I'm going to leave it with 5 sides, and I'm going to leave the point size at its default of 0.5. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to draw this star in the middle of my circle. So what I want to do is I want to put my cursor, what looks like in the middle of my circle, and holding my Shift key or my Option Shift key, I'm going to click and drag to create a star in the middle of my circle. And I'm going to release. Okay, so we've got our circle. Now, if I double click on my star, I can click and drag to pull this out, and now I have my star separated from my circle, but you'll see now my circle has a hole in it. Again, a nice way to make some cool effects. So you can see that these are actual holes. My properties panel here, I've got my selection tool. I'm not selecting anything. You'll see here on the properties panel where we can change the stage color. I'm going to click on that color box, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a bright shade of pink. And we can see here we do have a hole, in fact, in the middle of our rectangle, in the middle of our circle. Let me change this back to white. I just wanted to show you that those do have holes in them, which is kind of cool because then you can do some layering effects. Remember, Flash is many times used to create little animations, and sometimes used to create entire websites. Okay, so we've used the Polystar tool to create a star. Let's go ahead and go back to our Polystar tool. Let's click on options and let's change this to polygon. And let's go ahead and change this to 8 sides. And I'm going to click OK. We'll go ahead and use the same colors. I'm just going to click and drag over here. Again, if I hold my shift key, it's going to constrain the proportions and I'll get a perfect octagon. I'm going to get my selection tool, letter V, double click on it so I can move it back here on the stage. So we've made a couple of different shapes. We've made a rectangle, we've made a circle, we've made a star, and we've made a polygon. By using the shape mode, we can actually layer these on top of each other and then remove sections or shapes from another shape. Let's go ahead and save our document so that we can use this later. I'm going to do File. I'm going to select Save. And remember, the first time I select the Save option when saving any document, it's going to give me the Save As option where I can actually name my file and then the location of it. So let's call this Flash Shape Practice. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And you can go ahead and decide where you're going to put it by using the drop-down menu here for the Where. And we're going to use the format. We're going to keep it as a .fla. I'm going to click Save. Okay, we see now that our tab now says Flash Shape Practice, and when I hover, it actually shows me the path of where my document has been saved, which is a nice feature. So I now have my Flash Shape Practice file saved.